In this video, I'm going to go through each of these steps and tell you what you can do in each step and how you can bounce between these steps according to how the cold call goes. So the first step is to open the call. And one recommendation that we make is that at the very beginning of the call, you go through a step to confirm that the prospect is available to talk. Now, this is somewhat debated with a lot of salespeople disagreeing with confirming availability at the beginning of a cold call because they say it invites an objection. It gives the prospect an opportunity to say that they're not available. And many salespeople recommend that you just power through. Don't ask if they're available. Just keep going until they tell you that they're not. Now, I actually prefer to confirm that the prospect's available because, first of all, it's the polite thing to do. If you're going to go talk to a colleague at the company that you work for, instead of just barging in their office and talking about something, you might ask if they're available. The other thing that this does is that it helps you to identify how busy the prospect is. Because remember, we're operating with the assumption that the prospect is busy, but we want to know how busy they are. Are they normal busy in terms of the normal day-to-day operations and business, or are they crazy busy? Crazy busy would be they're sitting in the middle of a meeting, they're on the line, they're dealing with a deadline of a report that's due at the end of the day, they're fighting some sort of fire. If they are crazy busy, that's not a good time for you to try to perform your cold call. When you confirm that the prospect is available, one of the nice things that does is that buys you a window of time for you to operate in. And this can make both you and the prospect much more comfortable, as opposed to not confirming that the prospect's available and just asking another question and talking about another thing. Every time you ask another question, you're operating on borrowed time. Confirming availability can also help you to create a mini spike in the level of rapport that you have with a prospect because you're being polite and you're showing that you understand that the prospect is busy and you're asking for permission before you try to move forward in any way. Now, one key here is how you try to confirm that the prospect is available, because a lot of salespeople might say something like, "Is it a good time to talk?" Well, we're assuming that all prospects are busy, so it's probably never really a good time to talk. Did I catch you at a bad time? I don't like using the word bad time. It's negative language. Are you busy right now? We know they're busy, so we don't need to ask if they are busy. What we're trying to identify is how busy are they? Do you have a minute to talk? You probably want more than a minute. We also might not want to ask, do you have a few minutes? While that's a little bit more accurate, it might sound like we're asking for too much. Have I caught you in the middle of anything? This is how we recommend that you confirm if the prospect is available. And this one change can have a huge impact on your cold calls because this question is actually really effective at getting a more accurate read on the prospect. Remember, we're trying to identify, are they normal busy or crazy busy? Being in the middle of something is crazy busy. It is doing something or being involved in something or being in a scenario that we don't want to try to take them from. So it's very efficient and effective at getting a real picture on the prospect. It also communicates in a more familiar and less salesy type of way. If it's Monday morning and you want to go talk to your colleague about the weekend, you might stick your head in their office and say, "Hey, are you in the middle of anything?" With that, it's a more familiar way to communicate, more of a way that friends or colleagues or people that know each other communicate. And while you think you might want to make a good impression and communicate in the most professional way, that makes you sound more like a salesperson that's trying to sell something and can increase guardedness. By you sounding more familiar and casual, you can actually decrease guardedness. And because you sound different from other salespeople and people that are calling your prospects, this can be a form of pattern interrupt and help snap your prospects out of an autopilot response. And since you're communicating in a very polite and more familiar kind of way, this is another way that you can help to create rapport with your prospect. Now, one of the most common ways that salespeople will open a cold call is by saying something like, "Hello, Mary, this is Michael Halper calling from SalesScripter. How are you doing today?" And I recommend you eliminate the question of how are you doing today when you are cold calling. And this primarily applies to true cold calls where you're calling someone that you've never spoken to. If you've spoken to someone at least one other time, you can ignore what I'm about to tell you. But I believe that salespeople try to manufacture rapport by being overly nice. And this is one example of that, by asking someone they do not know, "How are you doing today?" And when you ask that, you flag yourself as being a salesperson that's trying to sell something and trying to manufacture rapport. And that can trigger guardedness, which can lead to objections and more difficulty opening the call. Now you may say, well, I'm just trying to be nice, and what else is there to say at the very beginning of a cold call? Well, here's one small change, and that is when you're opening the call, eliminate the question of, how are you doing today? And simply replace that with your question to confirm availability of, have I caught you in the middle of anything? Hello, Mary, this is Michael Halper calling from SalesScripter. Hey, have I caught you in the middle of anything? Now, this one small change here can completely transform your ability to open cold calls. And in fact, I get a lot of feedback from YouTube subscribers and from clients that this one change has completely transformed their cold calling efforts, because you go from sounding like a salesperson and triggering guardedness and objections and change the whole situation to where you're creating a setting that's more familiar, more rapport, less guardedness, and that can drastically improve your ability to open cold calls. When you ask the prospect if they're in the middle of anything, you're going to get a few different responses. The prospect may say, no, I'm available. Yes, but I'm okay. Or no, I'm fine. And so if the prospect is not in the middle of anything, the next place that you go in the cold call process, you advance forward to the next step, which is to share the purpose for the call. But now the prospect might also respond by saying something like, well, it depends what you're calling about, or what is this call in regards to? Or they may ask you, is this a sales call? And the great thing about this cold call process is that for all of these responses, you actually do the exact same thing, because the best thing to say for any of these is to also answer with the purpose for the call. So basically, if the prospect says anything other than they are in the middle of something, you move forward to the purpose for the call. But certainly they may say, I am in the middle of something, I'm busy right now, some form of I'm not available. And when that happens, you can deflect with an objection response like, oh, okay, well, I can be really brief, or I could call you back at another time. Which do you prefer? Or you can say, oh, okay, what is the best time for me to call you back? And the nice thing about these objection responses is that when the prospect feels like, okay, they're going to have to deal with you again when you call back, they may end up giving you a couple minutes, depending on just how busy they are, to deal with you in that moment and not have to deal with you again. So let's say that we advance on the cold call to the place where we can share the purpose for the call. And since you are a salesperson, you may think if you share your genuine purpose for calling the prospect, you may say that the reason for your call is to introduce yourself and your company, that you might be calling to schedule an appointment or a meeting, that you're calling to learn about their needs, that you're calling to share details about what you sell, or you're calling to see if they need and want to buy what you sell. Now remember, we want to minimize how much we look like a salesperson that's trying to sell something to decrease having to face objections, rejection, and resistance. So we want to avoid saying anything anywhere close to any of these as the purpose for our call. But we also don't want to mislead the prospect or to be dishonest in any way. So what we want to do is we want to spin the reason for our call in the best possible way. And we can actually use different building blocks from our sales message to do that. For example, we can use our value points as the purpose for our call by saying something like this. Great, well, the reason for my call is we help sales trainers to make it easier to teach their reps what to say and ask, and decrease new hire ramp-up time. You could also use your pain points building block as the purpose for your call. Great, the reason for my call is that we work with sales trainers, and they often have challenges with teaching the reps everything they need to say and ask, and it can take a long time to get reps ramped up and producing. Or you could use your customer example building block as the purpose for your call. Great, the reason for my call is we worked with a sales trainer at another software company similar to you guys, and we help them to make it easier to teach their reps what to say and ask. This ultimately helped to improve the performance for every rep on the team. After you share the purpose for the call, you advance to the next step, which is to use the sales takeaway. We talk about the sales takeaway in more detail in an upcoming training module in this series, but just to introduce it real quick, the sales takeaway is basically taking away what it is that you sell. Most salespeople try to always get the prospect to move forward and be more interested. The sales takeaway is the opposite of that by expressing doubt in the fit or justification for moving forward. And this can be really powerful because it's the opposite of what almost 100% of salespeople do 100% of the time. And so when we use this at the beginning of a cold call, we're actually going to use what we call a soft sales takeaway. So it's just a soft, slight version of a sales takeaway where we express a little bit of doubt at the beginning of a cold call by saying something like, I don't know if you need what we provide. I don't know if you're a good fit. I don't know if we can help you in the same way. I don't know if you're interested in improving those areas. I don't know if you're concerned about those areas. I don't know if you're the right person to speak with. I don't know if it makes sense for us to talk or not. So of course you just say one of those right after you share the purpose for the call, and this can be extremely powerful and help you to decrease the prospect's guardedness and establish your calls because it creates what we refer to as a push-pull effect. The push is basically you sharing your purpose for the call. For example, might be your value proposition. Great, the reason for my call is we help sales trainers to teach their reps what to say and ask, but I don't know if we can help you in the same way or not, and that's the sales takeaway, which is a pull. And like I said, this can be a really powerful thing that can decrease the prospect's guardedness by making them feel like that you're not trying to push something on them. It can also create a little bit of curiosity because you're doing a slight soft takeaway, and as you're taking it away, they might feel like, well, maybe that's something I need, or don't take it away so fast, or what exactly are you talking about? And after you use the soft sales takeaway, then you progress to the central piece of the cold call process, which is just to ask a few questions. And this is the key to your success when you're cold calling and when you're just being a salesperson in general, because not only asking a few good questions gets the call more focused on the prospect than focused on you and your product. It gets the prospect engaged and talking. It helps you to extract valuable information from the prospect that you can use to find opportunities and generate leads. And asking questions is the key to you being able to close the prospect at the end of the cold call process. And the key to closing the prospect on talking more is finding a justification and a reason for talking more. And the best way to find that justification is to ask good questions. One group of questions to ask are our pain questions. So we just did a sales takeaway. I don't know if we can help you in the same way. If I could ask you real quick, how difficult is it for you guys to get reps to have clarity around what best to say and ask when they're talking to prospects? And so what we're doing here and what our pain questions are designed to do is to find out how is it going in the area where we have something to sell. Are things great? Are they good? Just okay? Or are things not very good? And if we can identify that things are not very good or maybe even just okay, that gives us a justification for talking more. We could also use our current state questions in that exact same way. So we just did our sales takeaway. I don't know if we can help you in the same way. If I could ask you real quick, hey, are you guys using any type of sales script or sales playbook today? Of course, these current state questions are designed for what I sell, and your current state questions will be specific to what you sell, but these questions are really efficient and effective at learning what's going on with the prospect that you're talking to identify are things good, great, just okay, or not very good, and help you to uncover that justification in talking more. Now, whether you should ask current state questions first or pain questions first, I can't really tell you. It might depend on what you sell, or it might depend on who you're calling and how the conversation's going. But one rule of thumb is that if you sell more of a commodity type product in terms of it's something that a lot of your prospects are already using and have already likely purchased, current state questions are good to lead with so that you can just learn what they're doing in the area where your product fits. But if you sell something that's more unique and maybe the prospect doesn't even know what the heck it is that you sell, in those situations, sometimes pain questions are better to lead with, and then you can transition to maybe current state questions after you've started with pain questions. Now, having a good list of questions to ask and knowing what questions to ask will get you going in the right direction. But if you really want to get to the next level, you also need to prepare for how the prospect is going to respond to your questions. Whenever you ask a question, the prospect is going to say something, and what do we do then? And it's good to prepare for all of those different scenarios, which can sound a little overwhelming when you think about all the different questions you have and all the different ways a prospect can respond. But the cold call process provides a system that can make it much easier to figure out what to say for all the different ways the prospect can respond. And the way that we do that is we actually provide 3 categories that you can use for all of the different ways that the prospect can respond to all of your different questions. The first category is a hot response. This is when you ask a question, either a pain question or a current state question, and the prospect responds in a way where things are not great. In other words, they have pain and there's a tremendous amount of room for improvement. And we call this a hot response because this is like hitting bingo or hitting jackpot on a slot machine, where this is exactly what you're looking for because you're looking for a justification in talking more, and that type of answer gives you that. This would be similar to a doctor asking questions about symptoms and the patient has the exact symptoms leading to them having a particular diagnosis and a need for the medicine that the doctor has. The next category we refer to as neutral. And this is where you ask a question and the prospect can't say that things are great, and they also can't say that things aren't going good. They either say things are just okay, or maybe they don't know the answer to your question, or they don't know how things are going. This would be like a doctor asking a patient how they feel, and they can't say that they feel great, but they also aren't necessarily saying that they feel bad either. And the third category is a cold response. This is when you ask a pain question or a current state question, and the prospect responds that things are either great or going pretty good. This would be like a doctor asking a patient how they feel, and they say, I feel great and I've never felt better. So we have these very simple categories, and we can have a list of 100 different questions asked, but we can put all of the answers and all of the different ways the prospect responds into these 3 categories. And what that does is then we can have very simple rules to where to go next and what to do depending on the type of response that we hear. For example, if we ask a question or two and the response or the responses are hot, we can actually skip ahead in the cold call process and stop asking questions and move towards closing the prospect on talking more, because we have that justification for talking more. But we're actually not going to skip all the way to the last step of the process, which is the close, because what we want to do is we want to build a little bit of interest before we go for the close. And so we advance to the step right before the close, where we want to share just a little bit of information about us. And the way to transition to that next step is you might say something like this after you hear that hot response. You might say, well, actually, based on what you shared so far, it might make sense for us to talk more, because that's actually the type of thing that we help with. And then you share some of your product and company information. Now I'll show you what that looks like, but before I do that, let's talk about the other direction you can go if you get some of those other responses. Let's say that you get a neutral response, so the prospect says, things are okay, or I'm not sure, or you've asked a few questions and the prospect says, everything's going really good. In this case, we did not find that justification for talking more, so instead of progressing towards the close, we're going to go to the next step in the cold call process, which is to share some of the common pain points that the people that buy our product or service have. And the logic here is that we hoped to uncover pain points and a justification by asking questions. That did not work. So at this point, we're just going to get more direct and share the pain points that we help to solve, and ask the prospect if they have any of those by saying something like this. Well, it sounds like you guys are doing pretty good over there. But when we work with other sales trainers, they often have challenges with that it's really difficult to teach their reps all the different things they need to say and ask, and it can take a long time to get new reps ramped up and producing. Have you seen any of that? Are you experiencing any of those challenges? And so what we're doing here, this is like our fallback position, almost one last thing that we're trying before we walk away. And this is kind of similar to what a doctor might do before they give a patient a clean bill of health. They might just rattle off some symptoms and say, do you have this? Do you have that? Do you have this? And give the patient or the prospect one last chance to say, no, things are good, or yeah, I guess we aren't doing good in that particular area. And so your prospect will respond in some way. If you get a hot response, you could move forward towards the close, but again, moving to the product and company step to build some interest. But let's say you share pain points and the prospect says, no, I tell you what, I'm doing good in those areas. Or you get that neutral response. The prospect says, I'm not sure, I guess things are okay. In either of those scenarios, you might begin to walk away. And you can walk away with confidence at this point that you've done everything you can to try to find a reason to talk more. And it probably doesn't look like it makes sense for you to continue to spend your valuable time talking to the prospect and trying to sell to this prospect, because they don't need what you sell. And this is where you could do a sales takeaway by saying something like, well, it sounds like you guys are doing pretty good over there. It might not actually make sense for us to spend too much time talking about this. And then you can begin to move towards closing the file and letting the prospect go. I will say that if you just really want to give it one last shot, you could still progress to the product and company info step. But let's say that you find that justification, you found a reason to talk more, and right before the close, you want to share some information about you, and you can use your product building block at this step to share some high-level details about what you sell and the company you work for. And so you transition to this by saying, but it might make sense to talk in more detail because I'm with a company called SalesScripter, and we provide a solution called the Smart Sales System. It includes a sales script library, role-play software. Our tools basically help sales trainers to completely simplify all the complexity around teaching their reps what to say and ask. And, some ways we're different from other solutions out there. We're the only sales tool that helps with teaching reps what to say and ask. This would be a good place to share an example of a customer you've helped. And we actually worked with a sales trainer at another software company like you guys, and they were having difficulty getting their reps to know what to say and ask. And we solved this with our Smart Sales solution, and that helped to improve the performance of almost every rep on the team. So after you share just a few high-level details about what you sell, you can advance to the next step of the process, which is the close. But, I've called you out of the blue. I don't know if this is the best time to talk about this right now. Tell you what, are you available for a brief call where we can learn a little bit more about what you guys are doing and share some examples of how we've helped other sales trainers? And so if you're able to successfully close the prospect, then it's pretty simple. You know what to do. Confirm the meeting, schedule the meeting, send out your calendar invites and whatnot. But if you're not able to close, you are likely facing some sort of objection. And this cold call process gives you a place to go with just about all of the different objections you can face when you're trying to close the prospect. For example, you can bounce back up the cold call process to your questions. So let's say that you go for the close and the prospect either says, I'm not interested, we don't have any budget right now, we already use someone. Go back up to the question step and you could ask any pain questions that you didn't get a chance to ask. So they say, I'm not interested. Hey, listen, I understand. If I could ask you real quick, how much of a priority is it to get underperforming reps to perform better? And so what we're doing here is we're using that question to deflect away from their point that they're not interested, keep the conversation going, and maybe because it's a pain question, we might identify an area that things are just okay or not great, and that gives us a justification to go back for the close. We can also do that in an exact same way with the current state questions. Let's say we go for the close and the prospect says, oh, we already used someone for that. Okay, no problem. Who are you guys working with? How long have you been working with them? How's everything going? There could be a scenario where you've asked a bunch of questions already and then you go for the close and you get an objection, and you could always bounce back up to the pain points because maybe that was a step you skipped earlier in the conversation. So let's say the prospect says, we're not making any changes right now. Okay, listen, I understand. Let me ask you, we work with a lot of sales trainers and a lot of them are having challenges with, there's a lot of information that they have to teach their reps and it's difficult to get them to know what to say and ask, and that can take a long time to get new reps ramped up and producing. Have you had challenges in any of those areas? And so you're using your pain points in the exact same way. And what bouncing back to your questions and back to your pain points does is this gives you multiple close attempts for each prospect that you're trying to close. So this process keeps you in the game, gives you more close attempts, and that should help you to close more prospects and generate more leads. And so that is our cold call process. And I can actually use SalesScripter to demonstrate that cold call process for you with our Sales Simulator roleplay tool. And this is a script that's generated by the SalesScripter software. And over here are the different steps of our cold call process. And on the right side over here are our objections and objection responses. So let me demonstrate this process with our sales roleplay tool.
Hello, this is Mary.
Hi, Mary. This is Michael Halper calling from SalesScripter. Have I caught you in the middle of anything?
What is this in regards to?
Well, the reason for my call is we help sales trainers to make it easier to teach their sales reps all the different things they need to say and ask.
Oh, I see.
If I could ask you real quick, how difficult is it to teach your reps all the different things they need to say and ask when talking with prospects?
It is not an issue for us.
Oh, I see. Well, how do you feel about the amount of time it takes to get new reps trained and ramped up and producing?
I am a little concerned about that.
Well, based on that, it might make sense to talk more because I'm with a company called SalesScripter, and we provide a solution called the Smart Sales System.
We are not interested.
Oh, I see. Are you guys using any kind of sales script or sales playbook today?
I don't think so.
Oh, well, that's why it might make sense for us to talk more because with our sales script library, we can decrease new hire ramp-up time and improve the performance for every rep on the team. But I tell you what, I've called you out of the blue here. I'm not sure if this is the best time to discuss this. Are you available for a brief call next week where I can share some examples of how we've helped other sales trainers?
Sure, okay.
And so that is pretty much it for this module. The next module in this training program focuses on cold emailing. If you want more information, the best place to go is salescripter.com. Thanks for being here. Hope this was helpful, and we look forward to seeing you on the next video. Have a great day. Take care. Bye.